Hello, this is Ryan Riccitelli with asnews.net, and today we have North kite designer Ken Winter. He's also a pioneer of kiteboarding, so it's real good to have him here. Hey Ken, how are you doing?
I'm doing well, thanks.
And today we're going to talk about the North 06, kite line and get some feedback from you. So why don't you talk a little bit about, what North has this year?
Well, we have the Rhino, of course, and at Vegas, and we're getting really good response from both kites. They have some interesting features, I think, that most other kites don't have. And the Vegas, in addition to having the kind of handling that our pro riders like, also has the kind of D-power that pretty much everybody likes. So we're really pleased with that kite.
Well, and a lot of people, have been talking about the difference between a bow kite and a sea kite, and this is kind of North's answer to the bow kite, at least that's the way they're marketing it. And what does that exactly mean?
I'm not sure I'd call it North's answer to the bow kite. It's a kite that we think works really well for just about everybody, and it has some of the features that people claim for bow kites, and it has some stuff that bow kites don't do at all. For example, it has light bar pressure, which, from what I've observed, bow kites don't have, and it also has really direct feel between the rider and the kite. That is, when the rider is steering the kite, he doesn't really have to look at it to know where it is. Now, of course, a beginner or an intermediate rider who is spending a lot of time looking at the kite anyway, maybe that doesn't mean a lot to that person. But for anybody who has learned to kiteboard pretty well and knows where the kite is from the feel of the bar, we find it's much better to have a direct feel rather than the kind of feel you get when you have pulleys between the rider and the kite.
A lot of people are talking about that sea kites are going to be a thing of the past with this new bow kite design, and why don't you give me your feedback on that?
Well, I think first it's really, really important to define what a bow kite is. Now, a bow kite is something based on the patent that Bruno, basically the inventor of kiteboarding, came up with not too long ago. He patented a certain type of bridle arrangement with pulleys on the bar and maybe even a particular shape in the kite. I haven't read the patent, so I don't know exactly what the claims are. But the term bow refers to a very specific type of somewhat flat bridled pulleyed kite. Now, any kite that doesn't have all those features can't really be called a bow kite. You can have a kite that's somewhat flatter than a traditional sea kite, and that's not a bow kite. And you can even have a kite with a bridle on it. For example, the Globe Rider Sonic has a bridle on it, but it's not a bow kite because it doesn't have the pulleys and it doesn't have the same kind of bridle. First, when talking about whether bow kites are going to take over, you have to understand precisely what a bow kite is. And my feeling is that a bow kite, properly understood, is not the kite of the future. At the same time, I agree with people who think that the traditional C-type kite, like the Rhino, may be not as popular in the future. The Rhino that we have right now from last year is a really good kite, but we may not be seeing a lot of kites like that 5 years from now because things will have changed. But certainly a kite with that kind of handling and that kind of feel and that kind of consistency will be with us for as long as people are kiteboarding, because the good riders aren't going to want to give that up, and riders who aren't super experienced won't need to give that up.
Well, and you have 3 sea kites in your line, the Vegas, the Toro, and the Rhino. And, why don't you talk a little bit about who each of these kites are designed for and what type of riding?
Well, the Toro is the kind of kite for someone who's not, say, a real advanced or expert rider, someone who's fairly new to the sport. The Rhino is for an intermediate to expert rider who likes to jump high. and the Vegas is more of an all-round kite that maybe doesn't have quite the hang time of the Rhino, but is very versatile. It's particularly good in the waves, of course, because it has huge depower, and it's also good for freestyle because the rider has very direct control over the turning of the kite.
Well, and that's why I brought up that you have 3 sea kites in your line, and there really is not a flat kite or SLE or bow kite. And that's one of the things is a lot of your kites, and I live next door to a guy who flies North kites religiously, and he just swears against them because for all the reasons why, you were explaining about the bar pressure. And really what I want to get to is the safety aspect of it. And, you designed the 5th line element, and you've designed all kinds of different safety systems in this, in kiteboarding. And like, what is the difference between a bow kite type of depower, that 100% depower, and then like the 5th line element?
Well, that's a big question. The one thing I should point out is that we have, in fact, and have had for a few years in our school program, we've had a kite called the Buster, which has a simple bridle on it, and which has what we judge to be pretty much 100% depower. And yet, in the larger sizes of that kite, we still put a 5th line on it, even though it has really huge depower and always has. We put a 5th element type line set on that kite because even a bridled kite that has really good depower is not as safe as a kite that has a 5th line. And we think that's a really key thing for people to realize. If for example, you have a bridled kite and you've crashed it in the water and you're having trouble launching it and it inverts and it's windy, when that kite inverts and flies into the air inverted, you have no depower, essentially. It'll just drag you downwind until you can crash it again and maybe get it to revert to the correct orientation. So the thing, and this is something we've observed over and over, we get kites that are on the market and we try them out and we crash them and we test them and we see what they do, and even if we come out with a kite with a bridle, which is entirely possible. I have nothing against bridles. We've been using them for years. If we do that, there's almost 100% certainty we're going to have a 5th line on it just because of the safety. And I personally don't feel comfortable going on the water without it. Did that answer your question?
It did in a way. I mean, I know that question was pretty broad. Like I said, it's just your 5th line is designed in a specific way. I've seen it in use down here. I've seen it the way it holds the kite down on the water. I've also seen bow kite depower systems. Now, in your opinion, what is the difference between the two?
Well, between a bow kite style depower and a 5th element style depower?
and actually the efficiency.
Well, in the case of a 5th line or a 5th element system, when it comes to safety, the 5th element, well, it gives you a few things. One, suppose your kite is in the air and a lull hits and the kite starts to fall backward. You can just pull a little bit on the 5th line, and that'll reduce the angle of attack of the kite and bring it back up. So in gusty wind, it gives you more flexibility just in flying the kite. When it comes to handling the kite on the water in a relaunch situation or, say, in a lot of wind, you get more depower with the 5th line. More depower than you do with any bridle system I've seen or I'm aware of.
Well, and that does answer the question, and that's a controversy, and there's a lot of different opinions on that subject. And another question that I have is, there's a rumor that you were testing some bridleless bow designs when you were in Western Australia, and what do you think about a bridleless bow versus a bridled bow?
Bridleless bow is a contradiction in terms. There's no such thing as a bridleless bow. A bow kite, by definition, has a bridle.
So you're the guy who gets me into trouble because there's 3 ways to call, like SLE, bow kite, flat kite. So I guess what I'm saying is, in that the mainstream consumer looks at these kites and they just assume, oh, that's a bow kite. And so it's good that you are breaking it down. But when I'm asking you about a bridleless bow or whatever this is, what would be the category to put this in?
I went to some pains earlier to explain that a bow kite is a specific precise, specific type of kite based on a certain patent. It has certain features. And the reason I went to the trouble of saying that is that I want to have a lot of flexibility in the kind of designs I do, and I don't want to. I don't want people to say that if I have made a kite that's somewhat flatter than kites in the past that I've made, I don't want them to say, "Oh, that's Winner jumping on the bow bandwagon," when I'm not. I only want to be accused of jumping on the bow bandwagon if I actually have jumped on the bow bandwagon. So if I've tested a kite that's bridleless but is a bit flatter than your average sea kite, I'm not testing a bridleless bow. I'm testing maybe a hybrid. We can call it a hybrid, or we can call it something else, but it's not a bow, and it's not going to have the deficiencies that bow kites have. It's going to, we're taking a lot of trouble here to produce the best kite we can come up with. We could very easily have just copied the bow kite idea, because the designer, Bruno, sent us, we asked him, okay, we need to look into this. We asked him, what can you tell us about it? He sent us patterns for one. We could have done what some other companies have done and essentially copied his kite. But as I said, we feel it has deficiencies, so we're trying to do something better. We have tested a large variety of kites, all different geometries, all different shapes, some flatter than others, some with bridles, some without, and we'll continue doing that.
Thanks for defining that, because it's better to have you define it, or I'm sure my listeners would rather hear it from you. And you start talking about the hybrid kite, and that enters in a whole nother style of kite that is often people confuse with a bow kite. And like I said, it's better to hear it from you and have you define it to the listeners, because this is a huge concept. Like, I know that there's never enough information on this, and it's probably one of the concepts that is driving this new bow kite revolution, or a flat kite, hybrid kite. There hasn't been a lot of talk about the differences in it, and so that's why in this designer series that we've been doing, I've been picking different designers' brains and kind of having them define it, because I don't want to be the person to define the different styles of kites and the design of the kites. I just rather carry it to the people that are out there and get it from you. So with my long-winded response to you, that's why I was kind of picking into that subject, because it's such a controversial subject. So on another note, we talked about bow kites, hybrid kites, sea kites, and now let's talk about the bars that go with those kites. The bow bars, they have pulleys on them. Your bars don't. Why don't you talk about the difference between those, and then when you're done with that, if you could explain, like, on those newer hybrid kites, do you need those pulleys, or will you be going with the traditional bar setup?
Well, I think the one really key thing we don't like about the bow kites we've tried, aside from the lack of a fifth line, and we think that's a serious lack of safety, the other thing we don't like is the pulleys on the bar. And the reason we don't like the pulleys on the bar is because the pulleys make the feel of the kite less direct. So, of course, the kites that we've been prototyping and testing, the different geometries we've tried, we haven't had pulleys on our bar on any of them. And we expect we'll keep it that way, although, I hate to paint myself into a corner and say I'll never use pulleys on the bar. So far we haven't felt they're necessary. We haven't liked them.
With this new style of kite coming out, I mean, the biggest issue between, the bow kites is the bar pressure, and so will your hybrid follow suit with that, light bar pressure feel?
Yeah, we don't want to have too much bar pressure, that's for sure. But even among our testers, there's difference in opinion about how much pressure is good. I tend to like a little more pressure than, say, Jaime or Sky.
Well, let's get down to something that's less, technical, but it's really fun to have guys like you on the line, because I get to ask questions, and a lot of people ask me questions, so I just kind of relay them to the designers. But, what's your favorite kite in your line to ride?
It depends. If I want to go out in flat water and get big jumps with long hang time, the Rhino 12 is really hard to beat for that. And if, on the other hand, I'm in the waves, I like the Vegas. So And among the different kites within each line, I don't really have a favorite. We had more success in the past year than ever at making the different kites fit together and be consistent in quality and performance from size to size to size. You know, between the 7 and the 9, there are definite differences between the kites, but I can't really say I like the 7 more than the 9 or the 9 more than the 7. I like them both really, really well.
Are you constantly on prototypes, or do you ever just get to fly a nice production kite?
Well, I do both. I fly the production kites and I fly prototypes a lot. So I try them all.
You know, and you just got back from Western Australia, and is that where you're testing kites, or prime place to test kites?
In the winter, this past winter we were in Australia, and so we were doing our development there. And during the summer we do it in the Gorge. And between those two places we get tons of wind and sunny days and some really great conditions.
Hey Ken, well thanks for your time. I know you're a busy guy, and hopefully we can get you on the show soon.
It's a pleasure talking to you, Ryan.
All right, you have a nice day.
You too.
Bye. Hello, this is Ryan Riccitelli with ASnews.net, and today we have Peter Stiewe.
Yeah, that was pretty good.
All right, and he's the designer for Best Kites. He's over in Western Australia, so why don't you introduce yourself and give everyone a little bit of your background, Peter?
Yeah, hi Ryan, and hi everybody there who's interested to listening. Yes, I'm Peter Stiewe. I'm designing the kites for Best Kiteboarding, and I grew up in my background's a bit. I grew up in a water sport related environment. My parents used to be regatta sailors in northern Germany, and so I got into sailing at a very young age. And that was in the middle of the 70s. In 78, I picked up windsurfing, and basically added windsurfing to sailing. And so I was surrounded by all different kinds of wind-powered water sports. In that time we had a local sailmaker in the neighborhood, and that was great because he could support me with the sails, and I could learn from him. Then later in the 90s, I got into traction kiting, stunt kiting, and then in the late 90s, when kite surfing showed up, I got into that. And pretty soon after that, like in 2000, the windsurfing brand that knew me and knew about my background, they hired me to start to develop their kiteboarding kites. To realize this project, I went several times to Asia for prototyping and manufacturing supervising. And when I was during those times when I was working in Asia for that windsurfing brand, the factory they asked me if I would like to work directly for them in Asia. So I did that for a while, but I did not really stay and live in Asia. So then later on, I possibility, and I could do design work, like OEM design work for several different kitesurfing brands. And now I'm working exclusively for Best Kiteboarding. How
did you get involved with Best? I mean, how did that relationship start for you, obviously coming from that kind of background?
So when I met Jeff Beach in the DR at the beach, and so they heard what I was doing, and they were basically in the lookout for somebody to work for them and do this work. And so I think it was the day he was actually leaving the DR, and so we met up at the beach, and I had some prototype kites, and he tried them and he really liked them. Jeff is a really good test rider. He knows exactly what he wants, and Alex, Jeff, some of the crew came, and 2 weeks later, and we came to an agreement.
Well, why don't we talk a little bit about this year's kites, because this is your line of kites, and why don't you tell us about like the 2006, best kites?
Yep, the 2006 lineup, we have some C-shaped kites in that lineup, and we have the Varoo, which is I think everybody knows it by now, and the to fulfill the needs or the demand of what today's kite surfers want. The Jager, let's maybe start with the Jager. It's the Jager is the kite we are producing in I say normal ripstop material and normal Dacron leading edges. It's our C-shaped kite following the previous models of the previous years of the Jager. This year's Jager is I think an extremely freestyle, fast flying and oriented kite with very good response.
Well, let's talk a little bit about the Jager. You got the Jager and you have the Jager Pro. Now, like, what's the difference in those kites and, like, who are they made for?
Yeah, okay, the Jager and the Jager Pro is our Pro line kites have different material in the leading edge, so we developed together with Cuban Fiber a special leading edge material where we basically have a composite material from Cuban Fiber, and we added to that material and woven material to make the manufacturing process and the abrasion durability much better. So the effect of this material is that we have basically durable and abrasion resistant material like the normal Dacron material, but inside we have the technical benefits of the Cuban Fiber material, which are mainly that we have fiber alignment from 0 degrees, 90 degrees, and also 45 degrees, which extremely beneficial for the torsional rigidity of the leading edges. And this enables us to use smaller diameter leading edges, but also it provides us with a much better response because we do not lose too much energy in material stretch.
Obviously, a lot of people would want to know this, and we'll just tangent for a second. You know, Cuban Fiber, you guys produced the Hellfish. Were you one of the designers on the Hellfish, and like whatever happened with that?
The Hellfish. I mean, the Hellfish was a beginning of a project. And concerning R&D, actually it was an extremely progressive and not negative at all. I mean, I know that there's a lot of negativity and negative thoughts about it, but it wasn't, because it was a high-tech investment. Actually, it was we were able to collect lots of information and knowledge, and this knowledge we are using now for our Pro Series line of kites. And prototypes we are doing right now, we will see this knowledge gain will have a big impact on future kite performance. And I look at it from the point of view, which was extremely progressive, and it's a high-tech investment.
I've seen that you've integrated the Cuban Fiber into these new kites, but now we step into another, dimension of kites with the new SLEs, and the Waru has been actually really popular among a lot of people. And where do you see it going? Do you see like the C-shaped kites and that style of kites and all the, like you said, Cuban Fiber? Do you ever see using that in flat kites?
Yes, we do it, and I'm testing these kites right here at the moment, and also Alex and our test team, they have the kites which they are testing. And we are quite amazed how much impact this different material has also in the performance of the SLE flat or bow style of kite. I mean, the general step from the C-shaped kite to a flat SLE kite, it's a solution for basically for better power control, and that's an important factor in the sport. So to be able to sheet out the kite almost like a sail on a boat, it gives us a lot of control about the power output of the kite, so we can choose how much power we like to develop depending on the maneuver or situation we are kiting in. With the C-shaped kite, we have the limited depower ability, and so we have to do it by edging with our board, position the kite in the wind window. The new material, what's so amazing about this material is the responsiveness we are gaining. So when the kite, basically when the wind hits the kite, when we give a steering impulse from the bar into the kite, this material is behaving much more direct. We don't lose any energy in bias stretch. So the material is basically more efficient and more responsive.
Well, and I guess my next question is, you've done all this R&D with all, this different materials, and you were going one direction with the Hellfish, and then now the flat kites come. Now you're obviously evolving, some of these designs of carbon fiber over to the flat kite and progressing just the normal Waru. Do you foresee, like, the flat kites just completely, taking over the market and just nobody making sea kites, or best not making sea kites anymore?
This is a hard question, and I think it depends a little bit how kite surfing in itself is evolving. And I think, we see now kite surfing, kiteboarding is it exploded about 5 years ago. So, and the sport itself is evolving now in distinct areas. So we have different elements like wake style kiteboarding, freestyle wave riding, or just relaxed cruising on the weekend. And all these areas, they're forming their group of people. And so we as a brand, and as me as a designer, so we need to work and develop kites for these people, for them to have the right equipment to do their sport. I think there will be a variety of kites out there, where we see kites which are close to C-shaped kites, but also kites which have a very high protected area.
Which kite in the best line would you consider like the best jumping kite?
The Nemesis Pro for sure. Nemesis Pro is a high aspect ratio kite, very responsive. It has a carbon fiber leading edge, and that kite is a jumping machine.
And is that designed for the average person, or is that designed for more of the advanced rider?
It is designed for. It is designed more for the advanced rider. It is actually pretty easy to fly, but due to its higher aspect ratio, it's a little bit harder to relaunch. If a not advanced rider is using this kite, he might have a little bit of problem with that, but generally the flying characteristic is very smooth, very easy, but it has a very good vertical pop and hang time.
And I guess my other question would be, like, what's the difference between the Yarga and the Nemesis? Is it that high aspect ratio?
Yeah, the aspect ratio is different. I mean, the whole kite itself is different. Every kite I make, every size I make, every model I make, I try to harmonize every single size and every single model, that it has its specific characteristic, and is flying the way it's supposed to do. The Yaga is more like a freestyle-oriented kite, with a more narrow turning radius, and it is very responsive, very aggressive flying. The Nemesis is more has a bigger turning radius, but it's still very responsive in the power it delivers to you.
I got another question that I'm sure our listeners really want to know is, what's the bar pressure like on the Waru?
The bar pressure is more on the light side. It is definitely lighter than on a C-shaped kite, but it's still that you have the control and you have to feel where the kite is. So it's still responsive.
What do you think about these new hybrid kites that are coming out, and are you guys, progressing into that whole area of kite design?
Yeah, I think we have hybrid kites, and I think the hybrid kite is definitely some kite which is interesting to look at. There's different attributes of hybrid kites. Do
you think that some of these manufacturers that are progressing their C-shaped kites into the hybrid kites and not going into a flat kite, what do you think about that?
It's hard to tell. It comes back to the philosophy of the company and what you're trying to reach and what people you're trying to reach. We have, like I mentioned before, we have different groups of people who like different kind of kites. So it's not, we can't say that's why we have different models of kites, why we have different lineups to everybody to be able to choose the kite he like. I think we can't say like one kite is the ultimate kite, which is the kite for everybody. So I think the variety of kite is a good thing, and that's also with a hybrid kite. So the hybrid kite will have its place, and that everybody can pick the kite what's best for his style or her style.
Well, are you guys going to have any more of those really cool, like, shiny, chromed out kites? Because those are pretty...
I love to.
That was pretty bling-bling, as they say.
Yeah, they were pretty cool looking, huh? So that was a pretty amazing material. So it's that's a good question. That goes into areas where I think I cannot really talk about yet, but it's definitely interesting.
I think most people who saw those kites, everybody was very intrigued, and they definitely caught your attention when you looked at them in the sky. So whether they did whatever they did, and they were really cool to look at. I had a chance to fly one down here, and it was an interesting kite. But where do you test most of your kites, and how does that all factor in?
Yeah, at the moment I'm like I had earlier. I'm located in Western Australia. We have very windy and all different kinds of conditions here, and so I'm doing work from here. And then in the northern hemisphere summer, basically we all meet up in Brazil, and we have like a station there where we where the team comes, like different dealers from us. They come there. We have there's a big a lot of tourists come by, but also the core group of the company is there, and we are testing these kites over there. We have conditions of basically probably 99% of wind security there between from 10 to 25 knots. So that's a very good testing background over there.
We always let our designers and everyone on asnews.net throw shouts out to their friends. So now's your chance to say hello to everybody. Yes.
Hello, everybody, and thanks for listening to the interview. It was a lot of fun, and thanks to you, Ryan, and it's great work you're doing there. And kite safe. Always look what's downwind of you, and look out for weather conditions. This is one. We have a sport here where we are dealing with wind energy, and the most important thing is to look at the weather before we go out, to keep the sport safe for everybody.
Well, hey, I want to thank you for coming on today, and I know everyone's going to be really interested to hear what you had to say, so we will talk to you soon. I'm sure we'll be hearing back from you on asnews.net.
All right, cool. Thanks a lot. It was nice. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Okay, thanks. Bye-bye.